This cigar, I remember specifically with a very, very warm and fuzzy feeling because a lot of interesting things happen with it. My brother one time was just sitting on his desk, and we had come out with a few releases at this point. The Inch, our inaugural cigar before that in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
So he just sat there and said, "Hey, you're more creative than I am. Can you just do a band that's like more traditional?" And then he kind of showed me like a few examples of what traditional, meant to him. And anyway, so I had that task, and I remember just being a little scared. I mean, I'm not exactly a designer after all, but it was a very fun project. So I knew a painter who basically didn't really paint this type of stuff. He did that painting, did a lot of that type of stuff.
Right.
I said, "Oh, by the way, can you paint this idea, of a traditional type of band that I want to make into a story?" And he said, "Yeah, I think so." So anyway, that's how this band came about, which is, I guess, the beginning part while my dad's figuring out the tobacco part of it. And this band has been on all of our award winners. So I must have done a good job, right?
A little bit.
Anyway.
You started the ball rolling, let's put it that way.
Did.
And you
Yes,
made a big snowball afterwards with it all.
Yes, yeah. So anyway, I'm just kind of kidding on that because there have been a lot of, color decisions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with all of the newer lines. But anyway, it was a very fun process. And it has my grandma on one side with Perez-Carrillo behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It has, our family name, Perez-Carrillo, in the middle. And it has me here with Miami behind on the Freedom Tower. So if you want to learn more about this, there's a gazillion videos that we've done here on our channel. So take a look, ask us any questions you might like. Here we're going to take a more of like a educational, informational approach. Another reason this was very interesting to me is because of the wrapper, the Mexican San Andreas.
Mm-hmm.
That was one where my dad hadn't worked with a lot before. And I know there was a lot of chatter of, Mexican San Andreas and Mexican. So he's like, why not? I have all these, almost 50 years behind me at that point.
Right.
Why not give it a shot? And the shot worked out. So everybody was really happy with this cigar. Again, like a lot of our cigars, it did take a few years to get out there. And especially I remember him stating that has my mom on it. It has to come,
Yeah.
It has to be just right. It has to be perfect.
Yeah.
So it lived through an even, bigger, I guess, form of perfect than the other ones before it. And, I think this cigar really set us on the map for a lot of people who hadn't tried E.P. Carrillo cigars before.
Yeah.
So David, you are our in-house expert when it comes to tasting. I know you do a lot of the tastings with my dad, and you've been responsible for a lot of the final decisions as to what goes out there. So tell us a little bit about La Historia. I mentioned the wrapper, and I think to a lot of smokers, that's a very important component. So tell us a little bit about this.
Well, so like you said, it has a Mexican San Andreas wrapper on an Ecuadorian binder with Nicaraguan fillers. It's interesting. I mean, obviously, La Historia is the story in English. I think a lot of people confuse it with, they hear Historia, they think history. But there is a true story behind this.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you a question in the process about the story behind this. But, I think that when your dad looked at, let me work with Mexican, at the time that he did it, there were a lot of people who were actually shying away from Mexican. Mexican almost kind of got this as a rapper, like I don't want to say a bad rap, because it really wasn't a bad rap. It's just, I think there was a lot of other tobacco in the marketplace at the time that people were exploring and doing it. And he went old school. I remember a long time ago, Mexican was the Maduro that was used on several very prominent, very famous cigars. And he created a blend here that, again, is different. It's not the typical Mexican cigar that you think of. I mean, this is a very earthy and spicy cigar. That's the way I would describe it. It probably, for me, out of the Perez-Carrillos, it's along with the Pledge, that it's the more spicy of the ones, while Allegiance and Encore tend to be the less spicy ones. This has more spice to it, but it's got an earthiness to it. So it's interesting. You don't have a lot of the sweetness you get from the Nicaraguan jalapa that you see on some of the other ones. Even though this does have jalapa in it, you know, it's definitely earth spice.
I do have some sweetness here.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
It's subtle.
Yeah.
It's subtle.
It's like an undertone.
Yeah, it's like way on the back. You know, it's there, but it's not as prominent as like when you noticed when you were smoking the Encore, you made that comment that, wow, I really taste the jalapa sweetness on this. You know, it's not as prominent as that. You know, I think there's this again goes like I described, you know, our pledge. It's a very meaty cigar. You know, it's a big, bold expression cigar, and it's you know, it's really enjoyable as a smoke. It's difficult to describe for me because, you know, I find that for me, the two things that I taste are that earthiness, that spiciness, you know, but you pick up a lot of what your dad was trying to develop where there's a little bit of that bittersweet chocolate in it. You know, there's almost a little bit of like an espresso bean flavor in there.
Yeah.
You know, I don't get a lot of nuttiness, but every once in a while I'll take a puff and go, oh, there's some nuttiness. Yeah. You know, so it's one that I would tell you that, you know, if you haven't smoked it, try it. If you have smoked it, you've been smoking it for a long time and you keep going back to it, which means you love it. But one thing I will tell you is a lot of people that know, a lot of consumers out there that know R4 cigars. And when you ask them, what's your favorite? It still to this day shocks me how many people go La Historia.
Yeah, of the Perez-Carrillo.
Out of the Perez-Carrillos. Yeah, the four Perez-Carrillos. They go, it's La Historia. Hands down. I'm like, really? Over prequel, over Encore, over... Hands down.
Yeah.
You know, because it just hits a different mark. You know, it's almost if you were to look at this from a different way, it's kind of like if you look at Pledge, Encore, and Allegiance, they sort of all seem to play over in left field. Well, this one's way off in right field. It's not that far different in a lot of ways, but it's uniquely different enough in the lineup, you know, that it's just its own cigar. Yeah. Each one is its own cigar, but this one truly has its own characteristic to it.
And this was the first one that got a very high rating. It got the #2 cigar of the year in 2014. It is its 10-year anniversary. It's still going very, very strong. And like you said, you know, people keep coming back to this cigar. Oh. It was my favorite until maybe earlier today when I smoked the Encore. Yeah. Again, after a very long time, because the Encore today really, I don't know, it just really kind of stuck with me. I was like, whoa, because I hadn't tried it for a while. But this is definitely a contender. It's a really I guess a positive smoking experience, like delicious, I guess is the best way to describe it. So the cigar that won is the E3. That one's named after my brother. Right. And I suspect you're going to ask me the story about the story.
Well, what I was going to ask you, which a lot of people don't know because they don't pay attention to bands. All right. So this band, as you can all see, that's on my cigar here. This band that I'm showing you, and I'll turn it so you can see kind of the front and the back, is actually a piece of artwork that hangs in the lobby here in our offices in Miami. And it's very interesting. On one side of the band is a little tiny red dragon.
Yes. And
I've always been amazed to see that dragon sitting there. You know, why? Why is there a red dragon on our band, Lissette?
So that's part of the story because this is a story of history and family. And having my grandmother there is an homage to the women in our family because a lot of people don't know that my grandmother's family were farmers in Pinar del Rio, tobacco. So when her and my grandfather got together, it was like, you know, she was much poorer than he was. But regardless, I mean, they got together and they create, you know, this tobacco family, you know, which results in my dad being in the business and my being in the business and my brother being in the business. Even though we studied different things, we always thought we come back to this eventually. So that's part of the story. And then the dragon, while I was designing this, it took a very long time.
Yeah, I know.
So, you know, my children were small. And I kind of wanted to involve them as much as possible, you know, to continue that whole family, you know, component of this business. And I still try to involve them. One cares more than the other. But so my son came up with that idea because I showed him, you know, almost a final painting, I guess, when they dry it out before the painting.
Yeah.
And he said, why don't you just put a dragon there?
Oh.
And that's where the dragon comes from.
Oh.
And that dragon is in all of our cigars. And, sometimes I think about it as a lucky charm, maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Oh, yeah.
Who knows? But it
Little
just
dragon
goes,
watching over the Perez-Carrillo
he was
series.
very,
Yeah.
very young. 10 years old.
Yeah.
When
And I
he-
remember when I first saw this and I first looked at it, and I looked at it and I walked out to the lobby and I look at the bigger version of it and I'm like, all right, Lissette, why is there a red dragon in this?
Yeah.
And you told me the story, but there's a lot of, and obviously you can find the videos, but one of the other things that's very important, two parts of this that's very important, which play into the story of your family. Your dad always told me that whenever, even up until, and may she rest in peace, your mom passed, that quite often whenever he did a new blend.
His mom passed.
His mom.
Yeah.
Sorry. His mom. I did say your mom. His mom, your grandmother.
Yeah.
That he would go to his mom and he would give her the blend.
Oh,
and,
yes.
And sit in the backyard of her house.
Yes.
And smoke it with her.
There's a video of me and her.
Yeah, I know.
And there's a very, very old video
Yep.
of me and my grandmother talking about La Historia. And
Yep.
she told the whole story of how she met my grandfather in Spanish. So check
And
it
you
out,
were
guys, if
you were
haven't.
translating it. Yeah. And she was in a lot of ways the wind under his wings in his early days and throughout until she passed away. She was she was his biggest supporter.
Yes.
Biggest by far. But part of the other thing that's interesting, and there's two things I'm going to mention, behind Lissette is the Freedom Tower, and here in Miami. And the Freedom Tower was where, back in the early days of the Cuban immigration, where all the Cubans would go to get their rations and their food stamps and their tubs of peanut butter, which Ernesto loves to death, still eats peanut butter to this day because of it. So that's an important image that's there. But I think the real important thing is what a lot of consumers don't understand is, we look at this, and when you're at an event, when you're here in the US and go to an event at your local store, your local brick and mortar, a lot of times you're going to see that in that brick and mortar, the owners of cigar companies or the people that are representing or the executives or the key directors, it's mainly men, and having a woman in this business is very rare. In the US, it's the exact opposite when you get to the factories. There are way more women in the fields, in the factories, doing the job than there are men.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of things that tobacco requires that women do way better than a man can ever do. So this whole presence that started was really an homage to the women in the family, but also the women in this industry that are behind the scenes every day, bringing us as a manufacturer, bringing us as a distributor, bringing me as a consumer, bringing you as a consumer, great product. So that's part of this whole story, and that's where this springboarded into the whole Perez-Carrillo series line. And if you look at any one of the cigars, whether it's La Historia, Encore, Pledge, or Allegiance, it's the same band. It's just a different color palette, a color wheel that's on it. But the dragon's there, your grandmother's there, you're there, the same look is there, everything's there. It's this whole story behind it. So get a chance to watch that video about the band, behind the scenes of the band, I think is what we called it, or something like that. Because it's really interesting to hear the different story that's out there about this. So if you have any questions about La Historia or any other cigars that we make, feel free to leave it below and let us know. We answer every one of your questions and any comments that you may have as well. And if you haven't tried La Historia after 10 years, it's about time. Celebrate with us its 10-year anniversary. Absolutely.
Give it a try. There's a lot of other good videos that we have here on our channel about La Historia and most of our other lines as well. So take a look. Let us know if we can be doing anything better as well. Anything you want us to talk about more. Take care, guys.
Thank you.